Welcome back, everybody, to another deep dive into the world of film, TV, and media. We've got a fascinating news roundup from Further and Better's Global TV, Film, and Media Industry News Roundup for weekend, March 1st and 2nd, 2025. Yeah, we've got it all. We got festival winners, we got industry challenges, we even got a little bit of AI drama sprinkled in. Oh, yeah, and we can't forget about the billionaires.
Billionaires, gotta love them. But seriously, there's a lot to unpack here, and it's amazing how these stories, while seemingly unrelated, actually reveal some pretty big trends happening in the industry.
Okay, so let's jump right in. One of the first things that caught my eye was this Norwegian production company called Motlys. They just won the Golden Bear at the Berlin International Film Festival for their film Dreams, Sex, Love, which, from the description, is not your typical feel-good movie.
It's definitely pushing some boundaries. I mean,
Yeah.
we're talking about a teenager who's infatuated with her French teacher, and then the whole family kind of gets caught up in exploring these unfulfilled
Right.
desires.
It's not exactly lighthearted fare.
Nope, not at all. And what makes this win even more remarkable is that Motley's faced a ton of rejection early on. They had trouble finding sales agents, getting into festivals, the whole 9 yards.
So they really had to persevere.
They did.
Yeah.
And that really says something about the challenges that independent filmmakers are up against these days, especially when they're tackling these more, unconventional themes.
Makes you wonder if maybe there's a growing appetite for stories that push the envelope a little bit, especially in a world where algorithms are often, dictating what we watch.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
I think Motley's win definitely suggests that both audiences and critics are still looking for films that challenge norms and explore the messy complexities of being human, which is, pretty hopeful for independent cinema.
That's a good point. Okay, well, let's shift gears a little bit and talk about the streaming giants. There's this buzz that Netflix might be getting into video podcasts. Seems like a pretty big move, especially considering that they also just decided to stop reporting their subscriber numbers publicly. What do you make of that?
Well, it's certainly an interesting strategy. On the one hand, moving into podcasts could be a smart way for Netflix to compete with the likes of YouTube and Spotify for, user engagement and ad revenue. But on the other hand, that whole secrecy around subscriber numbers is definitely raising some eyebrows.
Makes you wonder if they're trying to control the narrative a little bit, maybe as their subscriber growth starts to slow down.
Could be. I think it points to a larger shift that's happening in the streaming world. It's not just about the quantity of subscribers anymore, but the quality of content, its global appeal, and how platforms are adapting to the changing ways people are watching. Like, look at Disney Plus Ds, for example.
They've been doing pretty well for themselves.
Oh, yeah, they've already surpassed 200 million subscribers.
Yeah.
But their strategy is different from Netflix's. They're leveraging those big, well-established franchises and really catering to a more family-friendly audience.
Okay, so from streaming wars to billionaire satires, you flagged a film called Veni, Vidi, Vici that premiered at Sundance last year. What caught your eye about that one?
Well, for starters, it's directed by this Austrian-German duo, Daniel Hoesl and Julian Niemann, and they use humor to critique capitalism. The film stars Laurence Rupp as this, larger-than-life billionaire named Eamon Maynard.
Sounds like it could be a fun watch.
Oh, it is. But it's not just silly jokes. They managed to tackle some pretty serious themes, like power dynamics and wealth disparity, all through this lens of humor.
Which is pretty timely considering the current state of the world.
Exactly.
And
And I think that's what makes satire so effective. When it's done well, it can make us laugh while also encouraging us to think critically about the systems we often take for granted.
yeah, it's definitely more engaging than a straight-up lecture. Okay, so speaking of films that make us think, there's this movie called My Dead Friend Zoe that's been getting a lot of attention. Written and directed by Army veteran Kyle Houseman-Stokes, it actually won the Audience Award at SXSW.
Yeah, this film really stood out to me because of Houseman-Stokes' commitment to portraying the authentic experiences of veterans. He actually left certain lines in the screenplay blank, especially during those therapy scenes.
Blank. What do you mean?
So he gave the veteran actors the freedom to fill in those lines with their own words, drawing from their own personal experiences.
Wow, that's incredible. I can only imagine how powerful that must have been for both the actors and the audience.
It was. The film really avoids those typical stereotypes and gives you this raw and honest look at the challenges veterans face when they return home. It's a reminder that their stories need to be told, and they need to be told authentically.
It's a good reminder that filmmaking can be so much more than just entertainment. It can be a platform for social commentary, for healing, for giving voice to the voiceless.
Exactly. And I think this connects to a larger trend we're seeing in the media landscape, This desire for stories that are both entertaining and meaningful, stories that spark conversations and challenge our perspectives.
I like that. So speaking of stories, it seems like the trend of adapting books into TV shows is still going strong. You shared an article with me featuring interviews with several writers who are navigating this process.
Yeah, it was fascinating to hear their thoughts on how they balance their own artistic vision with the expectations of the fans who already love the book.
Hmm.
That pressure to stay true to the source material while also bringing something new to the table.
It's a tough balancing act for sure.
It is. They talked a lot about understanding the core essence of the story and its characters. And then it becomes about translating that essence to a different medium, making choices that work for the visual storytelling of TV, while still capturing the heart of the original work.
Almost like translating a language, right? Finding the equivalent meaning and emotional impact even if the words and form are different.
Exactly. And it really makes you appreciate the complexities of adaptation. It's this delicate tightrope walk between honoring the original and creating something new that can resonate with a whole new audience.
So, on a slightly less upbeat note, there's a story about a prop house in Hollywood that's closing down. They specialized in building those amazing faux libraries, which seems symbolic of a bigger shift happening in the industry, don't you think?
I do. I mean, this closure, along with Pinewood Studios, scaling back their expansion plans because of the global production slowdown, it all points to the challenges these traditional businesses are facing in the age of streaming and CGI.
It makes you wonder about the future of practical effects, all that artistry that goes into building physical sets. Is CGI taking over completely?
I don't think it's quite that simple. While
Yeah.
CGI offers amazing possibilities, there's just something magical about practical effects. That tangibility, that realness, it can really ground a story and even enhance the actors' performances.
Yeah, you're right. It's not just about the visual spectacle. Well, media commentator Kate Bulkley is calling for a more sustainable business model. She's urging the industry to focus on creating shows with a global appeal to better weather these kinds of disruptions.
Which is a really smart point. In today's globalized market, creating content that resonates across cultures is becoming more and more crucial. That could mean exploring universal themes, embracing diverse representation, or forming collaborations that bring together different perspectives.
So the industry's having to adapt not just to new technology, but to a changing world. Speaking of changing world, let's talk about artificial intelligence.
Hmm.
The EU just passed this new AI Act, and there's been a lot of pushback from some big companies.
Right. The AI Act is really focused on transparency. It requires AI companies to let the public know when content is AI generated and to notify right holders if their work is being used for training data. But companies like OpenAI, Meta, Mistral AI, they're worried that this could stifle innovation.
It's a classic clash of interests, isn't it? You have the potential of AI to revolutionize creative industries, but then you also have the concerns about intellectual property rights and the possibility of misuse.
Exactly. It's a delicate balance, and it raises some big ethical questions about technological advancements. How do we encourage innovation while also protecting the rights of creators?
Yeah, that's the big question. And thinking about it from your perspective, is there a way for AI and human creativity to coexist in a way that benefits both?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Hmm.
I think it's about finding ways to use AI as a tool that enhances human creativity, not replaces it. Maybe AI can handle those more technical aspects of the process, freeing up human artists to focus on the emotional core of the story, those unique perspectives that make storytelling so powerful.
Interesting. So on a more collaborative note, there seems to be a rise in partnerships between Western and Asian production companies. We've got Endemol Shine Australia working with TV Asahi, Fremantle venturing into Asia, and of course the success of shows like Shogun. What do you make of this trend?
I think it highlights a growing recognition of the power of global storytelling. Audiences are craving diverse narratives, and these kinds of partnerships allow for this richer exchange of ideas and perspectives. It's not just about entertainment anymore. It's about cultural exchange and understanding.
It's like the world is shrinking through the power of stories.
Exactly. And speaking of stories that capture the essence of a place, Trudy Styler's documentary, Passo Entrare, an ode to Naples, seems to be doing just that.
It's supposed to be a beautiful film, right?
From what I've heard, yes. Styler really wants to showcase Naples beyond those typical stereotypes. She's featuring all sorts of voices: author Roberto Saviano, municipal councilor Alessandra Clemente, women from this anti-domestic violence organization called Forti Guerriere, and even a musical performance by Sting.
Wow, that's quite a mix.
It is. And it speaks to the power of documentaries to transport us to different worlds and challenge our preconceived notions.
So from award-winning films to power shifts and industry challenges, we've covered a lot of ground already. But before we wrap up this first part, let's zoom in on some key executive moves and those intriguing projects in development that we were talking about earlier.
Sounds good to me. Let's see what's shaking things up in the industry.
All right, well, we got some promotions happening over at 42 West. We've got Kate Phillips stepping in as the interim chief content officer at the BBC. And then there's Tobin Babst, leaving Kaplan Perone to start his own firm. Seems like there's a lot of movement and ambition in the air.
It's definitely a dynamic ecosystem, constantly evolving. And these moves show that people are taking risks, pursuing their visions, really reshaping the landscape of the industry.
And now for the really fun part. What's in development? Well, it looks like we've got a Crazy Rich Asians TV series in the works. Al Pacino and Gus Van Sant are teaming up for a film called Dead Man's Wire. Sharon Horgan just inked a deal with HBO. Sharon Stone is joining the cast of Euphoria. And get this, there are even whispers of a new Office spin-off in development.
Wow, that's a lot to look forward to. Such a diverse range of projects. It really shows that the creative energy is flowing.
Makes you wonder what the future holds for the media landscape, doesn't it? What new trends will emerge? What stories will captivate us? How will technology continue to reshape the way we consume entertainment?
It's a constant evolution, that's for sure. The only thing we know for certain is that the next chapter is going to be full of surprises. It really is. The media landscape, you just never know what's going to happen next. Speaking of exciting projects, though, there's this upcoming film about Farah Pahlavi, the former Empress of Iran. It's being directed by Emily Atef. And it seems to be tapping into that same kind of fascination with, like, royal figures and historical dramas like The Crown.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's interesting, too, because it's focusing on a figure who's not as well known, but has this incredibly compelling story of resilience and exile.
Yeah.
It makes you wonder, with all this talk about AI-generated content, will we see a shift back towards, like, stories grounded in reality, back to history and real people?
That's a good question. Maybe there will be this, like, resurgence of interest in real-life stories, kind of as a counterbalance to the fantastical worlds that AI can create. But at the same time, technology can also enhance those historical narratives, right? It can give us new ways to visualize the past and really immerse audiences in those stories. So it's not necessarily an either-or situation.
Yeah, that's true. It's all about finding that balance. Okay, so speaking of blending the real and the imagined, Netflix just greenlit this new sci-fi thriller series called Impact Winter. It's actually based on a post-apocalyptic podcast, and Francis Lawrence, who directed The Hunger Games, is on board to produce. I feel like this is right up your alley.
It definitely sounds intriguing. Adapting a podcast into a visual medium presents some unique challenges, though.
Yeah.
Like, they'll need to really expand on that audio world.
Yeah.
Build up the visuals and translate the intimacy of the podcast format to the screen. It'd be really cool if they pull it off.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, well, let's talk about a show that's a bit more established. There's news about a new season of Daredevil, and Matthew Lillard has joined the cast. Color me intrigued. I'm not sure what to expect with that one.
It's definitely an interesting casting choice. Lillard's known for his comedic roles, but Daredevil is pretty dark and gritty. So it'll be interesting to see how his energy translates to that world.
Yeah, it seems like they might be trying to subvert expectations a little bit. I mean, Marvel's done a good job of injecting humor into some of their darker stories before, so maybe that's what they're going for here.
Could be. It'll be fun to see how it plays out.
Okay, well, from gritty superhero worlds to soulful melodies, Idris Elba just directed this short film called Dust to Dreams, starring Seal. It's set in Lagos and tells the story of a nightclub owner's daughter who finds redemption through music. Seems like a pretty powerful story.
It does. And it reminds us that stories can really transcend borders, Music especially has this universal language. And Elba's film, with its themes of family legacy and personal transformation, it could resonate with audiences all over the world.
Definitely. So now shifting gears a bit to something a little closer to home, ITV is doing a new docuseries on the poisoned blood scandal. It's a really complex and tragic story that affected thousands of people in the UK. I know this is a sensitive subject, but what are your thoughts on them taking this on?
Well, I think it's important for documentaries to tackle these kinds of issues,
Yeah.
Sensitive as they may be. The poison blood scandal had such a devastating impact, and a well-made docuseries can really shed light on the victims' stories and the systemic failures that led to this tragedy. Hopefully it can help bring about some much-needed awareness and accountability.
Yeah, it's about starting a dialogue, right? encouraging people to learn from the past and hopefully prevent something like this from happening again.
Exactly. Documentaries have that power, to educate, to advocate, to inspire change.
So on a lighter note, Apple TV Plus just ordered this new darkly comedic thriller starring Tatiana Maslany called Maximum Pleasure Guaranteed. It's about a divorced mom who gets caught up in blackmail, murder, and youth soccer. I don't even know what to make of that.
Sounds like a wild ride. But, goes back to what we were talking about earlier. Audiences are looking for shows that defy categorization, that blend genres and offer something fresh and unexpected.
Dark comedy can be tricky, though. It can be brilliant when it's done well, but if it's not handled carefully, it can be a total miss.
Oh, for sure. Maximum Pleasure Guaranteed will definitely need to strike that delicate balance between the humor and the darkness. Dealing with those tough issues with sensitivity while still being entertaining. We'll have to see how they handle it.
And speaking of entertainment that's both familiar and new, Peacock is moving forward with that Office spinoff we were talking about. Oscar Nunez is reprising his role as Oscar Martinez, and the series will reportedly focus on a new set of characters but keep that mockumentary style.
Yeah, that seems like a smart strategy. They can tap into the nostalgia and the built-in fan base of the original show while introducing some fresh faces. The challenge, of course, will be to capture that same comedic chemistry and sharp writing that made The Office such a hit.
It does make you wonder, though, with all these revivals and reboots happening, are audiences getting tired of the familiar? Is there a risk of oversaturation?
It's a valid concern. There's a fine line between capitalizing on nostalgia and just rehashing old ideas.
Yeah.
But I think the key is to offer something new, whether it's a fresh perspective or a deeper exploration of the original concept. If you can do that, I think there's still an appetite for these kinds of shows.
Okay, well, let's hop over to Australia for a minute. Billionaire James Packer just made a big move with his company ADH-TV. They acquired the remaining regional television assets of Southern Cross Austereo. I imagine this is going to have some pretty significant implications for the Australian media landscape.
Oh, absolutely. This is a major power play. And it highlights this trend of consolidation that's been happening in the media industry. As these big companies acquire smaller ones, it raises questions about diversity of ownership and what it means for content creation and local programming.
It's a reminder that the media landscape isn't just about the stories we see on screen, but also about the behind-the-scenes deals and the power dynamics that shape what we consume.
Exactly. It's important to be aware of these industry shifts so we can be more informed viewers and engage with media more critically.
Okay, so now let's talk about nurturing the next generation of storytellers. The BBC is offering some pretty amazing training opportunities for aspiring drama professionals in all sorts of fields: design, makeup, post-production, the whole works.
That's fantastic to hear. The BBC has such a strong legacy of producing high-quality drama. And by investing in training, they're ensuring that that legacy will continue.
It shows how important mentorship and creating pathways for new talent is. And it's a good reminder that filmmaking is a collaborative effort that requires all these different skills and perspectives.
Couldn't agree more. And speaking of diverse perspectives, there's been some positive buzz coming out of the Berlinale this year. Industry buyers seem really excited about the films they're seeing.
That's great to hear. Festivals play such a vital role in promoting independent cinema and connecting filmmakers with audiences around the world. Their success is really crucial for the health of the film industry as a whole.
Oh, absolutely. Film festivals are all about discovery, innovation, and giving a platform to voices that might not otherwise be heard.
And speaking of industry events, there's been a lot of chatter coming out of MIP London and the London TV screenings. The conversations seem to be focused on mergers, the potential of YouTube as a player in the industry, and the development of new formats.
It's fascinating to see how these events shape the conversation around television and how the relationship between traditional broadcasters and those digital platforms is constantly evolving. The lines are definitely getting blurrier.
It's a really dynamic time to be in the industry, that's for sure. So much is changing so quickly. Oh, and here's a cool story about innovation. Channel 4 in the UK is partnering with the Duke of Edinburgh Awards for this new educational series called Teachers on Tour.
Teachers on Tour. That sounds fun. What's it about?
It follows teachers as they take on these outdoor challenges. And the idea is to inspire their students to push their own boundaries and try new things. It's a great example of how television can be both educational and entertaining.
I love that. It's a good reminder that learning can happen anywhere, not just in the classroom, and that stepping outside your comfort zone can lead to all sorts of growth and discovery.
So are you ready for a few more intriguing projects before we head into the final stretch of our deep dive?
Absolutely. Always eager to hear about what's in the pipeline.
Okay, well, first up, boutique distributor 1-2 Special just acquired the North American rights to Radu Jude's film Continental 25. It's an existential black comedy that won the Silver Bear for Best Screenplay at the Berlinale. Have you seen any of Jude's work before?
I have, yeah. He's a really interesting filmmaker, not afraid to challenge conventions and really make you think. It's great that his films are getting more recognition over here.
All right, well, next up we have British actor Ray Penthaki, who is making his directorial debut with a film called In Starland. It's a story about generational divides and human connection. He co-wrote it with Jason Cavan. Sounds like it could be a really moving film.
It does. Those themes of family relationships and the challenges of communicating across generations, those are things we can all relate to no matter where we come from.
Okay, here's some heartwarming news. Production company Off the Fence just signed a development deal with 2 Emmy-winning journalists. They're going to be producing new true crime series. And their first project is going to focus on the case of Rosalie Ballin. She was a pretty significant figure in U.S. criminal justice history.
It's great to see experienced journalists involved in true crime. They bring that level of expertise and integrity to these stories. It's important that these cases are handled with accuracy and sensitivity.
Absolutely. So, circling back to that Office spin-off, it's interesting how certain franchises just seem to have this staying power. They continue to capture the imagination of viewers even years later.
It's true. I think it speaks to the enduring power of well-crafted characters and relatable storylines. Even in a world with so much content out there, there's something comforting and familiar about revisiting those beloved worlds and the characters that inhabit them.
Wow. It's amazing to think about all the ground we've covered. We've talked about everything from festival wins and streaming shakeups to billionaire antics and the rise of AI.
It feels like we went everywhere. But even with all that, I think we only scratched the surface of what's happening in the media world.
I think you're right, but we did hit on some of those key trends that are shaping things, like globalization, those blurring lines between traditional and digital media, and that ever-growing need for diverse and authentic stories.
Yeah, for sure. And you know what else really struck me? Just how resilient the industry is.
It is.
Even with those challenges like production slowdowns, ethical questions about AI,
Yeah.
there's still this constant drive to adapt and innovate and create. People are determined to connect with audiences.
Definitely. And speaking of connection, one of the most encouraging things we talked about was that rise in global collaborations,
Oh,
right?
yeah, absolutely.
We've got Endemol Shine Australia partnering with TV Asahi, the success of shows like Chicken. Audiences really seem to be hungry for those stories that offer fresh perspectives and that cross-cultural understanding.
It's like the world is becoming smaller, through the power of storytelling.
I like that. And it's not just about entertainment either. It's about breaking down barriers and building empathy.
Exactly. And this really connects to the importance of authentic representation, like we saw in those films, My Dead Friend Zoe and Trudy Styler's documentary on Naples.
Yeah, those were both so powerful. And they remind us that media has this responsibility, right, to showcase the real richness and complexity of the world, to amplify those marginalized voices and challenge those preconceived notions we all have.
It's so important.
Yeah.
And as we move forward, into this increasingly digital world, a world that's more interconnected than ever, I think we need to remember something.
What's that?
Technology should serve storytelling. It shouldn't dictate it.
That is a good point. We talked about how AI has the potential to, completely change the creative process, but then there are also those ethical concerns.
Right.
And that conversation's only going to keep evolving as the technology does.
It will. But what matters is that we approach AI with a critical eye. We need to make sure it's being used responsibly and ethically, and that ultimately it helps human creativity, not replacing it, but, enhancing it.
Okay, so as we wrap up our deep dive here, what are some of the key takeaways you hope our listeners will, take away?
Well, firstly, I'd say embrace that whole dynamic nature of the media landscape. It's constantly evolving. So be open to new trends, new formats, new voices. There's so much out there to discover.
I like that. Be open to new things.
Yeah. And secondly, be a critical consumer of media. Don't just take everything at face value. Question those assumptions, challenge those stereotypes, and get into those thoughtful discussions about those stories that are shaping our world.
Engage with it.
Yeah, exactly. And finally, and this might sound cliche, but never underestimate the power of a good story.
It's true, though.
It is. Stories connect us, they inspire us, and they can change the world. So keep looking for those stories that resonate with you and keep sharing your own stories with the world. You never know who you might touch.
I love that. And on that note, we'll wrap up our deep dive into the world of film, TV, and media. Until next time, stay curious, stay engaged, and keep exploring that vast and always changing landscape of storytelling.